Okay, so I was commuting to work this morning and I heard 1 Samuel 20, the story where it talks about Jonathan and David and something about a 3-day period being in close proximity to some kind of a feast. And I think most people are in agreement. This is, you see the timestamps like the first day of the month and the second day of the month, and there's only one feast, biblical, Levitical, Creator's Feast, not Jewish feast, but Creator's Feast, that happens near the first day of the month or the first day of a season, and that is the Feast of Trumpets. And so, there might be a part 2 to this, and I haven't had time to fully think this all out, but I just wanted to try and start up a discussion on this, because there's something interesting about that 3-day period. Like, why, if it's a Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Trumpets is only one day, so what's the tradition? Why are they hanging around for 2 or 3 or 4 days around this feast? Like, I don't see any instructions to do that. And I know 119 Ministries put out a video that kind of, from the Lunar perspective, suggested why they might hang around, what the tradition was that they would hang around for a few days around this one day that is the feast. And so I'd like to rewatch that. It was maybe their Feast of Trumpets video, but I'd like to find that and remember what they were saying about that. But there's still something interesting that needs to be explained, because the timestamps given in 1 Samuel 20 says, he says tomorrow is the new moon or the new month. And I'm not going to get into that too deep, but new month, check out my other month video a couple years ago. It has a picture of 364. It explains briefly how there's a mistranslation between when you read new moon and new month. It should actually be saying new moon. No, it should be saying new month or possibly new season, but definitely not new moon, because there's a completely different word for moon. But anyway, in the story it says Jonathan or David start out by saying tomorrow is the new month, first day of the new month, and then later in the story it says and the day following that Jonathan was feasting again, and they say it was the second day of the month. So I'd be curious from that Lunar perspective to hear again, why was it that they were still hanging out for that extra day. I'd be curious to hear what that was. But I had a thought when I heard this 3-day thing this morning. All of a sudden something jumped into my head. I'd like to propose another theory about that, and that is, if this was the Feast of Tabernacles, sorry, I meant to say trumpets twice, and the months are actually supposed to be solar months and solar seasons, and like this Feast of Tabernacles actually falls on the first day of the 7th solar month, which is the first day of fall, the first day of the second half of the year. It occurred to me, if you've watched any of my other sundial videos, you will hear me have said when you confirm an equinox event and solstice events, these days that divide the seasons, you will have heard me said it is best to get 3 days of data to confirm these solar events. Because the sun, moon, and stars will give signs, I think, and, my channel is kind of dedicated to trying to understand these times, regardless of calendar interpretations, but just to understand the signs for starters and try and make heads or tails of it later. But signs, per Genesis 1:14, what are the signs that we see in the heavens? And we see different signs, like I said, from the sun, moon, and stars, but I've kind of had a focus on the sun, understanding the sun, because that's what gives us the seasons, I think. We have seasons only because of the sun, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the seasons are a result of the sun moving north and south in the sky, and it's that apparent location of the sun in the sky is what gives us our seasons. When the sun is close to us, it's hot, it's summer. When it's far away from us, it's cold, it's winter. But anyway, there are these special signs that the sun gives, and for example, on a solstice day, you will see 3 different patterns over the course of a year. You're going to see 2 arcs in a straight line, and at some point around the solstice events, it's going to hit 2 extreme arcing positions in the most extreme north and the most extreme south. But the thing is, you need 3 days of data to confirm that sign. Like, you can't just get 2 days of data, because if you only get 2 days of data, you don't know if the sun has returned. 2 days of data isn't enough to say, oh yeah, the sun's returning. You need to have 3 days of data to be able to see that the sun was progressing one way, it stopped, and it started to return. Likewise for the equinox events, you need 3 days of data to confirm that it's that the line was arced, and then it's straight, and then it's arced the other way. You'll hear me mention in my other videos that it's the same kind of thing. You just don't know. If you only collect 2 days of data, it's just a good idea to collect 3 days of data, because you'll see that flipped line. Like, who knows, that you may thought you have saw the straight line, but it might have actually gotten a little straighter the next day, or it might so it's just good to. It's just good to get 3 days of data so you can see that. And on that note, I'm having thoughts again, like, this is all just brainstorming, so Enoch could be wrong, a lot of things could be wrong, translation could be wrong, but I'm noticing something, and I'm just putting food for thought out there. But anyway, because I don't even know necessarily yet, I haven't 100% proved that the equinox should be happening on the day of the straight line, because of the issue of it seeming that the seasons might not be equal if that's the case, but it still might be. We might have just made some errors in confirming that, but it seems like the seasons need to be equal solar months, equal solar seasons, and it doesn't quite seem like that's happening with the straight. I just want to make sure that the straight line math thing isn't like an equilux event where it happens at different locations at different times. I'd like to see someone at the equator verify the equinox event. But anyway, not going down too many rabbit trails, the thought I had was they might have been hanging around in 1 Samuel 20 for 3 days, and it might have become this tradition to do so because they had to wait for these signs. Like, they needed the time to confirm that the sign occurred. And so, like I said, I'd be curious to hear from the lunar perspective what 119 Ministries had to say about that. But it's the same kind of thing, I suppose, except from the solar month perspective. They had to wait 3 days to see the sign, to confirm that the sign occurred. But that said, there is still also the question that must be answered, well, why were they still feasting on the 2nd day of the month? As long as there's no translational errors going on there, that's another question I have. Why? But the question has to be answered both from the lunar and solar perspective. But why would they hang out for that extra day? Like, it seems, because maybe Enoch's wrong. Like, according to Enoch, it says, you see the sign, and the sign is supposed to be the end of the season, and then the day following the sign would be the first day of the new month or season. So, So that would seem to say to me the first day of the month or season would be the day following the sign, and at that point you should be able to see if it was a solstice event, you would see the line returning, or if it was an equinox, you'd see the arc flipped. So, I don't know why you would need an extra day after that, unless again, something about Enoch might be wrong, and that should be shifted over. But just food for thought. There's something good to be discussed in this story in the Bible. Translation, little stuff might need to be verified, but I just want to put that out there as food for thought. Let me know your thoughts. Shalom, and may Abba bless as you continually seek out His truth in love with a pure heart.